Please subscribe and share for more story. The winter storm settling over the Bainbridge coastline wasn't an ordinary storm. It crawled across the sky like a living thing, pushing icy rain into every crevice of the world. On the porch of a glass-walled mansion overlooking the dark Puget Sound, Mara Ellison, age 70, stood trembling beneath the weight of cold and heartbreak. Her coat, an old wool piece she'd grabbed in a panic, hung heavy with rainwater, dripping onto the imported stone tiles. She stared at the door that had just slammed in her face, the soft click of the lock echoing louder in her chest than the thunder overhead. It was the sound of finality, the sound of a mother realizing she no longer had a place in her own child's life. Maris had survived droughts in her childhood, storms that blew apart barns, and the long grief of burying a husband taken too early. But nothing, not even death, had prepared her for the humiliation of begging her daughter for shelter and being treated like a stranger. Her soaked hands shook as she touched the closed door. Inside that warm house was Cecily, the daughter she had raised with every fiber of her being. And tonight, Cecily had looked at her as if looking at a burden she didn't want. Only 12 hours earlier, Maris Alder's world had still been intact. She had been asleep in her modest farmhouse in the Yakima Valley, dreaming lightly of her late husband's laughter, when a strange roar jolted her awake. At first, she thought a storm was ripping across the fields, but the sound grew sharper, wilder, like a monster tearing through wood. Heat slammed into her before her mind could make sense of it. Flames crawled up the walls of her bedroom, licking the ceiling with terrifying speed. No, 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 she choked, stumbling toward the hallway. The air was thick with black smoke that stung her eyes and filled her lungs. She grabbed only her purse and an old flannel robe before crawling through the back window as the roof collapsed behind her. Outside, in the wet grass, she watched 40 years of her life vanish in a tornado of fire. The loom she inherited from her grandmother, her husband's old rocking chair, her wedding album, everything turned into glowing embers. When the volunteer fire crew arrived, there was nothing left to save. The chief, a man who'd known her for decades, told her softly that the blaze came from faulty wiring in the newly renovated workshop. Maris stood there shivering, realizing she had nothing, no home, no savings, no insurance strong enough to rebuild. She felt desperation settle into her mouth like metal. With shaking hands, she accepted a neighbor's jacket and boarded the Greyhound bus to Seattle, using her last few dollars on the fare. The ride felt endless. Her clothes smelled of smoke, her hair was still damp from a stranger's attempt to wash it away, and she had no charger for her ancient flip phone. As the bus wound through mountain passes and thick forests, she whispered to herself, "Cecily will help me. She has to." Her daughter lived in a luxury mansion on the water with her wealthy husband, Rowan Mercer. They had rooms they never used, closets full of designer coats, and a life so gilded that Maris had always felt out of place during visits. But she was her mother. The woman who had nursed Cecily through childhood fevers, worked double shifts to pay her college tuition, sold heirlooms to cover emergencies. Surely grief and disaster would melt away past disagreements. Surely blood meant something. By the time the bus rolled into Seattle through sheets of rain, Maris felt hope clinging to her like a stubborn ember. She walked 3 uphill miles to the gated neighborhood, whispering, "Everything will be okay. She will open the door." She believed it until she reached the porch. When the door opened, it wasn't Cecily but Rowan who stood there. He held a crystal glass of whiskey and wore a sweater so soft it looked like woven fog. His eyes widened, not with concern, but disgust. "Good God, Maris, what happened to you?" he said, stepping back as if the sight of her might stain the hardwood floor. Maris forced breath into her lungs. "The farm, it burned. Everything's gone. I just need somewhere to sleep for a few days. Just until I figure things out." She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. Rowan didn't move. He blocked the doorway with his body like an immovable gate. "You can't stay here," he said flatly. "This is not appropriate." His tone carried the coldness of someone discussing a broken appliance. Before she could respond, Cecily appeared behind him. Her daughter's makeup was flawless, her silk blouse unwrinkled, her blonde hair shimmering under the foyer lights. She took one look at Maris, soaked, ash-stained, shivering, and her expression faltered into something that wasn't pity. It was embarrassment. "Mom," she whispered, "we're hosting an investor gala tomorrow. You can't show up like this." "Cecily, I have nowhere else," Maris pleaded, reaching out a trembling hand. Cecily stepped back, folding her arms to avoid being touched. Rowan gave a small, cruel laugh. "There are shelters downtown for people in the unfortunate conditions," he said. "And this community has strict guidelines about transients." The word stabbed deeper than any fire could have. Maris looked at her daughter desperately. "I'm not asking for much. Just a night. Just warmth. Cecily, please." Cecily bit her lip, glanced at her husband for approval, then murmured, "Mom, it's not a good time. You'll make things complicated." Maris felt her heart fracture. She watched Cecily, her baby girl, guide Rowan's hand off the doorknob to close the door herself. "I'm sorry," Cecily whispered without emotion. And then the door shut. The lock clicked. The porch light hummed, indifferent to her humiliation. Maris stood frozen, rain running down her face like tears she couldn't yet release. After a long moment, she turned away and began walking down the driveway. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she couldn't stay where she wasn't wanted. By the time she reached the bus stop at the neighborhood's entrance, her legs were shaking. She collapsed onto the plastic bench, curled into herself, and for a brief, terrible moment thought, maybe I should have stayed in the burning house. Her hand brushed against her purse, and she felt something stiff inside, a card. She pulled it out and wiped raindrops from the surface. Gold lettering shimmered faintly under the street lamp. Lucian Hale, founder, Hale Innovations. The name warmed her chest. Lucian, the boy she once fostered. The boy who'd arrived at her farm at 10 years old with bruises on his arms and anger in his eyes. He had been dropped off with the warning, "He doesn't trust anyone. He's trouble. He'll run." And he did try to run on his very first night. Maris had caught him halfway to the ridge with a pillowcase full of apples. Instead of scolding him, she had walked beside him in silence before finally asking, "Where will you go that's better than here?" He hadn't answered. He had simply followed her back. Over the years, she fed him, taught him to weave, to plant seeds, to see beauty in small things. He had grown into a brilliant, determined young man who left for a scholarship across the country. They had stayed in touch, then drifted, then reconnected briefly before life pulled them apart once more. But he had always signed letters with, "Thank you for choosing me." And now all she had left was his card. Her flip phone flickered at 8% battery. Her thumb hovered. Would he laugh? Would he reject her too? She dialed. The ringing felt like an eternity, and she was preparing to hang up when a deep, polished voice answered. "This is Lucian." Maris's throat tightened. "Lucian, it's me. Maris." Silence. One heartbeat.
Two.
Then his voice dropped all its corporate sharpness and filled with raw concern. "Maris? What's wrong? Why are you crying? Where are you?" She sobbed, unable to hide her despair. "The farm burned. Cecily turned me away. I don't know what to do." His voice sharpened, not with anger at her, but at the world. "Tell me exactly where you are." She looked up at the street sign. "I'm at the corner of Lakewind and 5th, the bus stop outside the gates." "Stay there," he ordered. "Do not move. I'm coming." The call ended. Maris clutched the phone against her chest, trembling. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The cold blurred her vision. Rain hammered against the shelter roof. She wondered if she had imagined his voice, if her brain, desperate for kindness, had conjured it. Then she heard the engines. 3 black SUVs turned the corner at impossible speed, headlights slicing through the storm. They braked so sharply that water splashed across the pavement. The doors flew open before the vehicles even stopped. A tall man in a dark suit sprinted through the rain. "Maris," he shouted. He reached her like a force of nature. It was Lucian, older, broader, carrying the intensity of a man who commanded entire corporations. But his eyes, warm, sharp, familiar, had not changed. He knelt in front of her on the soaking pavement, heedless of ruining his expensive suit. "My God, you're freezing," he whispered, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "I've got you. You're safe now." His security team deployed umbrellas, forming a protective wall. Lucian lifted her gently, as if she weighed nothing. Inside the SUV, warmth hit her like sunlight. She shivered violently as her body thawed. He draped a wool blanket over her and held her hands between his own. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" he asked softly, voice breaking. "You've never been a burden. Not to me." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Lucian brushed her hair back. "Maris, you are the reason I survived my childhood. I owe you everything." As the convoys sped toward the city, Maris finally whispered the truth. "Cecily called me an embarrassment." Lucian's expression darkened into a cold, focused fury she had never seen before. "Rowan laughed," she added. "They told me to go to a shelter." Lucian inhaled sharply, then leaned back in his seat, jaw tight. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I'll handle it." He pulled out his phone and sent several rapid messages. "But first, you need warmth. A doctor. Food." They drove to his penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, a glass tower gleaming even in the rain. Waiting inside was a woman with gentle eyes and rich brown skin. "This is Mara," Lucian said. "My partner." Mara rushed forward and embraced Maris without hesitation, ignoring the soot and rain. "We've been so worried," she said. "The bath is ready. I made soup." For the next hour, Maris was cared for like royalty. She soaked in warm water until the chill left her bones. Mira brushed her hair and gave her soft clothing. She ate soup in front of a crackling fireplace, her hands finally steady. When she emerged, Lucian was waiting with a tablet in hand, his face grim. "Maris, we need to talk," he said. She sat beside him, bracing herself. Lucian took a slow breath. "I asked my financial team to look into your records and the repairs done on your farm." Maris frowned. "The contractor Rowan found?" "Not a real contractor," Lucian said. "A shell company Rowan controls through 2 intermediaries." Maris's stomach dropped. "He overcharged you for every repair, triple the market rate. And the wiring that caused the fire." Lucian tapped the tablet, revealing documents. He paid for substandard materials, pocketing the difference. Maris covered her mouth. "But the insurance, I still had something." Lucian shook his head. "Rowan was your insurance broker. He diverted your payments. You thought you had a comprehensive plan, but he secretly switched you to minimum liability 3 years ago." Her heart pounded. "Why would he do that to me?" Lucian's eyes hardened. "Because he wanted your land. The vineyard on your Westfield? Developers have been trying to buy that region for years." Maris stared at him, hollow. "Did Cecily know?" Lucian slid the tablet toward her. She signed off on transfers to her personal shopping account. Trips, jewelry, a car. Maris felt something inside her break, not loudly, but with the quiet finality of a thread snapping under strain. Lucian stood, pacing to the window. "They stole from you because they assumed you'd never understand the paperwork. They treated you as disposable." Maris whispered, "My own daughter." He turned around sharply. "She made her choice. And now I'll make mine." He clicked another document open. "Maris, I also own Ridge North Financial." She blinked. "The bank?" "Yes," he said. "They hold Rowan and Cecily's mortgage." He walked back to her and knelt beside the couch. "They're drowning in debt. They've missed payments to keep up appearances." Maris shook her head slowly. "What are you planning?" Lucian's voice softened. "To give them the one thing they gave you." "And what is that?" she asked. "Consequences," he said simply. He placed his hand over hers. "Tomorrow we go back." The next afternoon, the storm clouds lifted, leaving the skies streaked in lavender. Lucian didn't choose subtlety. He chose truth. They flew in by helicopter, landing on the neighboring country club's private pad. A limousine carried them to the gates of Rowan and Cecily's mansion. Maris wore a navy suit Mira had tailored overnight. Her hair was neat, her posture straight. She looked like a woman reclaiming herself. The front lawn buzzed with activity. Caterers carrying trays, florists arranging towering bouquets, staff setting up heaters for the gala. Lucian stepped out first, his presence cutting through the scene like a blade. Maris followed, steadying her breath. They walked through the open front door. Without knocking. In the foyer, Rowan barked orders into his phone while Cecily fussed over a marble statue. Their faces drained of color when they saw Lucian. Rowan sputtered, You can't just walk in." Lucian ignored him. "Good afternoon," he said coolly. "We need to discuss your theft." Rowan opened his mouth to protest, but Lucian snapped his fingers. One of his aides handed Rowan a thick envelope. "This," Lucian said, "is your notice of default. Your mortgage is now due in full." Cecily gasped. "You can't do that." "I can," Lucian answered, "because I own the bank. And your financial lies end today." Rowan tore open the envelope with trembling hands. "This is insane." "No," Lucian said calmly. "What's insane is committing fraud against a senior citizen. My legal team has already notified federal authorities." Rowan's legs buckled. Cecily rushed to him, panicked. "Lucian, please, this is a misunderstanding." "It's documented theft," Lucian corrected. "You siphoned her insurance money. You funneled repair funds into private accounts. You let her home burn." Cecily turned desperately to her mother. "Mom, you have to help us. Stop him." Maris looked at her daughter's familiar face, now a stranger's. "You closed your door on me," she said softly. "You closed your heart long before that." Cecily reached for her, crying. Maris stepped back. "Pain makes choices. You chose him. And he chose greed." Lucian stepped forward again. "Here are your options," he said. "You have 24 hours to vacate this property. It will be seized as partial repayment. If you remain tomorrow at noon, law enforcement will escort you out." Rowan whispered, "But the gala, we have investors coming." Lucian shrugged. "Cancel it. Or don't. Watching your foreclosure unfold might be good entertainment." Murmurs rippled among the staff. Cecily sobbed harder. "Where will we go? We have nowhere." "Shelters exist," Lucian replied evenly. "You told Maris that yourself." Cecily's scream echoed through the foyer as Lucian guided Maris toward the exit. "I'm your daughter," she cried. "You can't do this to family." Maris paused at the threshold. Without turning, she said, "Family opens doors. Family shields you from the storm, not pushes you into it." Then she walked out, this time not in shame, but in strength. 6 months later, life had reshaped itself gently around Maris. Rowan was serving a 6-year sentence for fraud and embezzlement. Cecily lived in a small apartment in Spokane, working a reception desk in a dentist's office. She sent letters, long, pleading letters, asking for money, forgiveness, conversations. Maris didn't hate her. She simply no longer owed her anything. Forgiveness didn't require reunion. It required peace, and Maris had finally found hers. She now lived on Lucian and Myra's green, sprawling estate outside Portland. He had built her a studio with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking rolling hills. Inside was a new loom carved from cherrywood. The first time she touched it, she cried. She spent her days weaving again, stories of fire, rain, loss, and rebirth, threads of pain turned into patterns of strength. One evening, Lucian entered the studio quietly, watching her weave. The rhythmic clack-thump filled the warm room. "Happy?" he asked softly. She paused her shuttle and looked at him, the brilliant man who had once been a frightened boy clutching a pillowcase of apples. "Yes," she said with a full, steady breath. "I am." She had learned the truth at last. Blood is not loyalty. Love is not inherited. Love is chosen. And she had finally found her true home. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than